Hello and good afternoon. I am going to be busting some nutrition myths for you today. There are a lot of myths that are lurking around and were debunked a long time ago. Some of them were, and they really need to be put to bed. So I thought I'd talk you through a few today for something a little bit different. So the first food myth is that dairy is needed for strong bones. This is not true. There's plenty of research to debunk this myth. And the reason why this myth exists is because dairy, as we know, is high in calcium, and we know that our bones are made up predominantly of calcium. So yes, dairy does give us calcium and that is good for your bones. However, on the flip side, dairy can also be very inflammatory, and inflammation is not good for our bones. So actually getting your calcium from other sources like nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables, tinned fish that have the bones in, they're great sources of calcium without the inflammation. And what's much more important for your bone health is actually your vitamin D level and your magnesium level, and also vitamin K, because you can take as much calcium as you like either from dairy or in a supplement form, but if you're lacking in vitamin D, magnesium and or vitamin K, which there's a very good chance that you are because they're very, very common deficiencies, then you're not going to be absorbing that calcium, or you will be absorbing it, but you're not going to be able to get it into your bones. So actually what's much more important is making sure that you've got plenty of vitamin D, magnesium and vitamin K. And there are a few other nutrients to consider like zinc and boron, which are all really important for keeping your bones healthy by helping you move that calcium that you get from your food into your bones. And it always concerns me when I see someone taking quite a high dose calcium supplement and they're not taking any of these cofactors with it, because if you are absorbing that calcium but you can't get it into your bones, then where's it going? Well, the answer is it could be going into your arteries, and there is research to show that calcium on its own can actually be a risk for your arterial health. So not good at all. So you don't need to be eating dairy to get enough calcium. You just need to be eating a varied diet and making sure that your vitamin D and magnesium and vitamin K levels are all optimal. That's going to really help you keep your bones strong, rather than you having loads of dairy, which can be very inflammatory and can disrupt your blood sugar balance and your fat burning for that reason. So that's the first one. And then the next myth that I want to debunk is about cholesterol. So oftentimes people are told, oh, you've got high cholesterol, so you need to avoid cholesterol in food, which is an absolute lie, because we make our own cholesterol. We don't take cholesterol from food. Well, we do take a little bit of cholesterol from food, but we do that when we're lacking in cholesterol. We don't keep taking cholesterol from food if we've got high cholesterol. So foods like eggs and prawns and other things that are high in cholesterol, you do not need to avoid them if you're worried about your cholesterol or if you have high cholesterol. We do not take that cholesterol, animal cholesterol, and add it to our own. Instead, we make our own cholesterol. What do we make cholesterol from? Well, we make it to a certain extent from fats, but we really want to look at more the reason of why are we producing too much cholesterol. And again, it often comes down to inflammation, and there tends to be a correlation between blood sugars and cholesterol balance. So we tend to blame fats, but actually we really want to be looking at the amount of sugars and refined carbohydrates in the diet, as that directly impacts your cholesterol level. So that's that myth debunked as well. And on a similar theme, and hopefully this is one that we all know by now, but it's very worth mentioning because not everyone got the memo. we have been told for so long that fat is bad for us, but actually fat isn't bad for us. It does depend on the quality of the fat, as it does with any food source, be it a carbohydrate or a protein. It depends on the quality of it as to whether it is good or bad for us. But fat in and of itself, it doesn't make you fat. When we eat fat, we actually break it down in our digestive system to all its constituent parts that doesn't even resemble fat anymore, and then we absorb all those constituent parts separately, and then they go off and do different things. So once you absorb fat, it's not actually really fat anymore, and the things that actually contribute to our fat storage are, if you've ever watched any of my videos, you know that this is a very wide and varied thing. But from a food perspective, it's really your sugars and carbohydrates that contribute much more to your fat storage than the fat that you eat. Having said that, there are some fats that can be quite inflammatory, and we've always been told that saturated fat is not so good for us, and again, that's not so true. The type of saturated fat is very important, and we know that animal saturated fat is a little bit more inflammatory, so isn't going to be so good for us. But other types of saturated fat, like coconut oil, are extremely nutritious. And the monounsaturates and the polyunsaturates, which are things like your omega-3s and your olive oils and that kind of thing, they are extremely nutritious. And it breaks my heart when I look at someone's diet and I see that they're eating a low-fat diet, because they are missing out on so much goodness, so much heart healthy goodness. So we don't want to be avoiding all those lovely fats. We just want to make sure that we're eating really good quality ones. And so if you are eating animal protein, then where possible, choosing organic, grass-fed if you can, free range if you can. It's not always possible to find that holy trinity of organic, free range and grass-fed, but choosing one of those things or all of those things are going to really improve the quality of the fats that you're taking in, because fat in and of itself is actually very nutritious. Animals and plants store the fat-soluble vitamins in the fats. So if we're choosing everything that's low fat, then we miss out on all the fat-soluble vitamins, which we really don't want to do, and they're really important for your bone health, which I was talking about earlier on. So, fat, good. And then the next one, again, on a similar theme, is another myth is that meat is bad for you. Now, there is so much debate on the meat side of things, and there's plenty of research that shows that those who follow a vegan diet have lower levels of cancer and inflammation and various other things. But equally, there's also plenty of research that shows the opposite, and that, you know, people who are meat eaters can live very long, healthy lives. And I think one of the things that the research doesn't dig into enough is the quality of the meat that you're eating. Again, if you're eating meat that is intensively farmed, it's, you know, the animal hasn't had any exercise, it's not had any daylight, it's not had any good quality food, then it's not going to be a very healthy food source for us. So there's a lot to be said for eating a healthier animal, one that is free range, grass-fed and ideally organic, because then you've got an extremely nutritious food source with, you know, the density of nutrients that you're not going to be able to find anywhere else. So if you've got the budget to, then choosing better quality meat is extremely beneficial and nutritious for you. And if you don't have the budget, then perhaps having meat less often but choosing better quality is going to be a good option for you. And then on the days that you don't have meat, choosing plant-based sources of protein is going to be better. So meat, not inherently bad, it's more the really poor quality meat, intensively farmed, processed, that's the stuff that is going to be containing more toxins, pesticides, hormones, and things that we don't want to be consuming on a regular basis. And then another myth for us to bust today is that grains should be a staple in the diet. So when I say grains, I'm talking about wheat and rice and barley, those sorts of things. Now, for most of us, these are things that we have in the diet every single day, often every single meal. This includes your cereals, your bread, your pasta. So these are things that we really base our diets on, and they're a staple for many, many people. And, we include these things in the diet because they're cheap and because, it's what we've been brought up on and what we know to be just part of your normal meal. However, they are not something that we need to have in the diet, and certainly not in the quantities that we are probably in the habit of having. Grains can be extremely inflammatory, and we find that they can be very disruptive to blood sugars, and again inflammatory, disruptive to your gut function and lots of other things. So whilst you don't necessarily have to avoid them completely, we do want to be looking at how much of the diet they take up. And when you look at the food pyramid, unfortunately the bigger bit at the bottom is grains, and there's so much criticism of the food period from nutrition experts and functional doctors because of how much grains feature in that, and actually it should really be flipped upside down so that grains make up the smallest part of your diet. So there's certainly something that you don't need to exclude, but having them in a much smaller part and really prioritizing vegetables and the starchier root vegetables in place of those grains will be much less inflammatory to you, and often you'll feel better, you'll feel better digestion wise and less bloated and more energized as well. So those are the 5 myths that I wanted to bust for you today. So just to recap, so we said that dairy makes your bones strong. We determined that that is a myth. That you don't need to avoid high cholesterol foods, that we don't need to avoid fats, that meat is not necessarily bad for you, although everyone is different and some people do feel great not having meat. And grains do not need to be a staple in the diet. And actually, once you take grains out, or at least reduce them down, you make a whole lot more space for other much more nourishing foods. So I hope it's been helpful and interesting for you, and hopefully given you a little bit more freedom to choose some things that perhaps you may have been avoiding. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back again soon. Take care. Bye bye.